for his goodness, thanking him for his kindness, thanking the Most High God for everything that he's done for us as a people. So we're going to continue in our history with the book of Daniel. We're going to do I'm going to do Daniel chapters 3 and 4. One of the things that I'm going to recognize, I thank the Most High God for allowing me to travel safely and allowing me to return.
Hallelujah.
You know, it's funny. I was in the airport and my flight kept getting delayed. And what they said was, because I called, they said it was bad weather in New York. So I called, and I asked, like, is it like raining or something like that in New York? And she said, no, it's not raining at all. She said it's a little cloudy. So when they clarified it, they said, well, the clouds are too low. So that's why everything is being delayed. And me not knowing anything about weather, I'm thinking, well, what would that be? You know, what that mean that the clouds are too low? That doesn't even make sense. So anyway, the plane, you know, it took off. We went, and when I tell you the whole time, it was sunny, the whole time. And then when we got to New York, and the pilot said, yeah, so we're about to be landing in about 10 minutes. And I'm still looking, and I'm like, well, it's still sunny. So I don't know what they talking about, all of this cloud visibility, lack of visibility and all that. So the plane, then you hear the landing gear start to go down, so you know you coming close to the ground, and it's still sunny. And then for a minute, it got real dark.
One black.
As they were going through the clouds, it got real dark. And then right after they came from underneath the clouds, it seemed like the runway was right there and the plane was landing. And if you think about it, that makes sense. Because the clouds were so low, the visibility affects, you know, your ability, the pilot's ability to come down and get close to the runway because the clouds are so low. But me, I'm just like, I just want to get home. But, you know, I'm not an expert in that, so I just thought that was very interesting that Torah YAH got home. I had a nice meal waiting for me when I got home. And all that, some coconut rice and all that.
Bless.
I didn't even know people know how to make coconut rice.
Oh, man, made it specially for you. That was made with love, brother.
I think so. I think so. I hope so anyway. The other thing that I wanted to mention before I get started is, you know, when you talk about different things that are a blessing, and a lot of times we don't fully recognize what blessings are. You know, this week, my oldest, Teese, you know, she sent me and her mother, she sent me and Tex both texts. And what the texts were they were texts from different colleges, because right now she's in the process of applying for college. And they were texts from different colleges saying, because of your grades, we're gonna waive the application fee for this. And you know, you already, you know, guaranteed for certain scholarships and certain things, and we're gonna waive the application fee for that and all those different things. And so I sent her a text, and I'm talking about, listen, you my superstar, because if they ain't waived those college application fees, those college application fees I was gonna have to pay. So that's a blessing. You know, I just remember when she was like yay big, and I used to walk around with her, you know, tucked on my arm just like this. I used to walk around, tucked around just like this, and they used to be like, oh, don't do that, she gonna be retarded. Look at it now, you know what I'm saying? Look at it now.
Who said
so, you know, people got all types of sayings and all types of stuff. So what I say is, listen, if you want a smart kid, just walk around with them just like that. I ain't saying it's gonna always work, but I'm saying it's a possibility it can work. Smarter than I ever been.
Hallelujah.
Appreciate that. When we were talking about doing the best report card, and so you know, we told about the kid, huh? We're gonna get to that right now. We were talking about the kids and, you know, best report card in competition and all that. And I ain't gonna say no names. one of the first things they said was, we got to go up against Tees. But, you know, it's a blessing. But like Chief Nav said earlier on today, the Most High God didn't make us to be mediocre.
That's right.
And the only thing that if we really just apply ourselves, you won't even imagine the things that God will allow us to do because it's already in us.
Right.
But you need to apply yourself. And I think what's talked about in these portions is actually going to talk about some of those same things. But we're going to start to get into this portion of the book of Daniel, chapter 3. And one of the things, and the other thing that I wanted to mention is, so because I wasn't here, I did listen to what Chief Uziel did, the portion of Daniel that he did last week for a couple of reasons. One, because I didn't want to, especially when you get to a book like Daniel, which has like a lot of complex themes and things like that in it, I think that it's important for all of us that's going to be coming up to teach the book of Daniel that we make sure that we review the portions, because we need to make sure that we are all on the same page and bringing the same message. Because again, this is a book that has a lot of complexities in it. And with me listening to him and the portion that he did, it actually helped me to understand some of the portions in 3 and 4 that I'm going to be doing, which actually makes sense because, you know, when you follow things in a logical order, obviously it brings about more wisdom.
Hallelujah.
One of the things that I did want to just mention about Daniel 1, because another reason that we decided to go through the book of Daniel, because what we wanted to do was we wanted to bring across the history from ancient times all the way up until the last portions of when we went into captivity. So what you're going to see is, you're going to see after the book of Kings, when Judah was taken away,
Right.
and through the book of Daniel, and when they're going to come back, and when the Most High God is going to allow them to come back into the land. And then at that point, right after that, we're going to go into the story of Hanukkah, which actually represents another portion that the Most High God allowed us to go back when we were captives in the land itself. But it sheds light on certain history of us as a people. And unfortunately, we won't be able to go through the books of the history all the way up until 132 BC, no, AD, after the Bar Kokhba revolts, which is probably the last point that we were actually a functioning people, because after the Bar Kokhba revolts, at that point, the Romans was just sick and tired of dealing with us as Israel, and they just, that was basically the end. So when you read Daniel 1, because it's, and you don't have to go into it, I just want to kind of go through a couple of different portions related to it, so Daniel 1 to 4, it talks about the third year of Jehoiakim, and that's when the Babylonians first came, and that was their first siege against Jerusalem. Now, when you actually follow it, and I'm just going to kind of throw out a couple of scriptures in the interest of time, just so that we could kind of read it on our own and understand the everything that relates. You have 2 Kings 24,
Right.
1 to 5. You have 2 Chronicles 36, 5 to 8.
Right.
You have 2 Kings 24, 8 to 16. You have 2 Chronicles 36, 9 and 10. And you have 2 Kings 24, 17,
Right.
and 2 Kings 25.
Right.
And you actually have in there as well, you have the book of Jeremiah, chapter 39. So when you actually look at all of those portions together and you study them all together, you'll realize that those portions are talking about the same point in history.
Right.
And it talks about different aspects. So one of the things that we probably never would have even thought of is Jeremiah was prophesying at the same time that Daniel went into captivity, because they went in separate droves. So 586, 87 BCE is when everybody recognizes that the temple was destroyed.
Right.
And so that's when, you get those portions where Jeremiah is prophesying after that, and you get those portions that Jeremiah is prophesying before that. But what you also have is 11 years before that, because after the Babylonians first came in, which we read in Kings, after the Babylonians first came in, they took Jehoiakim out.
Right.
they took Jehoiachin out, and what they did was they were the actually ones that set up Zedekiah. Wow. And then Zedekiah reigned for 11 years, but what happened was Zedekiah got real disrespectful and was like, I ain't paying no more. So when Nebuchadnezzar, when he said he wasn't paying no more, then Nebuchadnezzar came back, and that was when the second drove of Israelites went out. But Daniel actually went out with the first drove of Israelites, which was plus or minus 597, 598 BC.
Hallelujah.
So we're going to start at that point. We're going to start in the book of Daniel, chapter 3, whenever you're ready. And I'm glad I got my Danite brother reading with me, because sometimes them Levites, man, Levites don't really do stuff right sometimes. And they treated me real nice where I went, but I just got a lot to say about it. I'm going to leave it alone because I'm just saying, but Levites don't be acting right sometimes. So,
but they treated you good where you went.
They treated me good where I went, more or less. Yes, I don't want to knock that. They treated me good where I went. Period. Okay. I'm just glad I got my Danite brother reading with me, because sometimes Levites don't be acting right. You know what I'm saying? I'm just leave it at that. And it's sometimes it be those Levites in New York that don't be acting right sometimes. Whenever you ready, my brother.
We're in the book of Daniel, chapter 3, verse 1. Hallelujah. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Judah and the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up.
Right. So now we're just going to kind of, and I know Chief Uzael talked about Nebuchadnezzar right quick, just to throw out another fact about Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was born in 630 BCE and died in 561. He reigned from 606 BC. So now, if you look at exactly what's happening here, this is a direct continuation of what happened in the last chapter. Do you remember what you talked about in the last chapter? What happened in chapter 2? Anybody remember what happened in Umigad? Because I know, tell me, what happened in chapter 2? What Nebuchadnezzar did in chapter 2? Anybody? Yes, sir. He had that dream, right? See, I knew you was gonna say that, right? He had a dream, right? Yeah.
He had the dream, and then the magicians and the sorcerers, and he wanted the magicians and sorcerers to interpret the dream.
Exactly.
But they couldn't interpret.
Go ahead.
And then,
see how the Levites trying to hold me up? Yeah. Exactly. Right. So now that was that image with the head of gold, with the arms and chest of silver, and so on and so forth. That was that image. And if you remember what happened, Daniel said, the magicians didn't know. Daniel said to him, listen, that dream is about nations that are going to come up after you. Babylon is the head of gold. The chest of silver is the Persians and the Medes. This is about nations that are going to come up after you, and that are going to reign. So thinking about that from the standpoint of the people, Nebuchadnezzar had provinces all over the place. Right. So now, if those other provinces got wind that there was a prophecy from God that other nations were going to come up, you were going to have people who are going to look to now try to take that throne. So this was a direct response to that dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. So now what Nebuchadnezzar did was he set him up an image of all gold. Yeah. Just the head was gold before. Right. And it was different metals to represent different nations. Right. Nebuchadnezzar was trying to make the point that, listen, this image is all gold. It's all me.
And I'm going to rule forever.
Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon is going to live forever. Right. He had to do that. Because the people needed to understand, his people needed to understand, his sorcerers needed to understand, they needed to make everybody know Babylon was going to reign forever. And that was what he did. So he said 80 cubits. So for everybody who was here this morning, how much is a cubit?
18 to 21.
18 to 21 inches plus or minus, right? So we're gonna use that same 18 inch measurement. 6 cubits. How many cubits is 6 cubits?
That's 60. 121, 620. No, 6 score. Right?
Well, I mean 6 cubits is that, but I actually meant 3 cubits. So okay.
It's 60, right?
60 cubits, right? 60. Don't shake your head. Don't shake your head. 60 cubits by 18 inches is how much?
Wait, hold on.
You said, wait, hold on. She said, wait, hold on. Don't worry, I'm going to help you out. It's like 1,080 inches, right? And 1,080 inches is how many feet?
A lot.
Like 90 feet, right? It was like a lot, like close to 90, right?
Really tall.
90 feet, really tall. So listen, Chief Nav talked about people and spending money. And listen, he had a 90-foot high, 9-foot wide image of himself. Pure gold. All gold.
Bow down.
Bow down. And that was what they said. So what they said, Nebuchadnezzar unveiled this 90-foot statue and said, now that we have this statue, make sure you make proclamation throughout the entire nation.
Yes, sir.
And all the nations and all of the provinces that are under my rule, that when you hear the harp and the pipe and the lyre and the bagpipe and all those different things, that you bow down to this image.
Break yourself.
That's what we got. That's what we got.
Good.
Break yourself fool. That's what we got. Come on.
Verse 3. Then the satraps, the prefects and the governors, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces.
And who?
All the rulers.
No. Who was the last person you said? Nah,
Sheriffs.
that was the first one. See, them Levites, man. The sheriffs. Why? Because if you did not worship that image, the sheriffs was going to come see you. Come on.
And all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. And the herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, trigon, psaltery, bagpipe, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whoso falleth not down and worship the same, shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the horn, pipe, harp, trigon, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up.
Right. So now, 3:7 said all nations, right?
Yes.
And all people.
Yes.
So would y'all agree with me that it was some Israelites that fell down and worshiped that image too?
Sure.
Would you agree with me if I made the statement to say when that harp and that bagpipe and that lyre, all that was being played, that it was some Israelites doing that Shema down drum beat with the break? With the break. Listen, with the break. I'm talking about that Shema down drum beat that them Levites made up with the break. I'm telling you, they was drumming when they to worship that image. You won't co-sign that? You was probably one of the ones that was drumming. You know what I'm saying? Probably one of the ones that was drumming. But I'm just saying, it was some Israelites. Danites not really known to be drummers. You know what I'm saying? How you even in this? Oh, I know why you in this. I understand. All right. It was some Israelites that worshiped that image.
Right.
Will we agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Come on.
Verse 8. Wherefore at that time, certain Chaldeans came near and brought accusation against the Jews. They spoke and said to Nebuchadnezzar the king, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the horn, pipe, harp.
You said every, now go ahead. Then you say every man, whenever they hear it, that's what you said, right? Okay, come on.
Trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoso falleth not down and worship shall be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace.
You said that. Come on.
There are certain Jews,
Listen, people,
whom thou hast appointed over the affairs of the province
that
of
might have been the
Babylon.
Danites. Come on.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
And them three too.
These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They have not served thy gods, nor worshipped the golden image which thou hast set up.
Let me tell you something about God for a minute. God, just because we say that we worship and we serve God and all of those different things, we say it. But how many times that we see people don't mean it? God knows. And so you can best believe that when you are one that are going to take certain stances, people are going to come and test you to see how firm you are in the stance that you take. That's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Come on.
13. Then Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then were these men brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach?
He was mad. He was upset, but look, just tell me. I know this ain't really true, but just tell me, tell me what you think. Is this true what I hear about y'all not lying down and worship and all those different things? Come on.
Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that ye serve not my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the horn.
I'm going to give you one more chance. Maybe y'all didn't hear it. Maybe you didn't know what it was supposed to be for.
Right.
So, you ready? Hold on. Y'all ready? Go ahead.
The pipe, harp, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is God that shall deliver you out of my hands?
Wow.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer thee in this matter. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us, he will deliver us from the burning fiery furnace and out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up.
So now, this, and a lot of times what we like to do is we like to bring ancient biblical talk into today's times. That Nike commercial with Colin Kaepernick,
Right.
this was the basis of what that Nike commercial was.
Correct.
Because the basis of it was, regardless to what, sometimes you have to sacrifice everything
Right.
in order to maintain the stance
Right.
that you know you're required to maintain.
Right.
And there is no, look, listen, a lot of us haven't been in this type of situation or scenario where you have to sacrifice your life in order to show God, I'm dedicated to the things that you tell me to do. And the statement that they made recognizes that they understood that God, that they were in captivity, and they were recently in captivity, and God was still upset. So there was a chance that God wouldn't listen to their prayer and see what they were doing. And it didn't matter. Because that wasn't the point. Because to them, the point was, listen, we know that the God that we serve is able to save. However, if he chooses not to, we still are not going to bow down to that image. And that takes a lot. That takes a lot. Because a lot of times what happens with us is we like to rationalize certain things. And we try to make up an excuse why it's okay to break God's law and God's still going to forgive. And God's still going to understand. God don't understand. So at this point, they took their stance and they said, listen, okay, all due respect, we're not going to bow down to the image. Come on.
19. Then was Nebuchadnezzar filled with fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated.
And just because you take a firm stance, that don't mean that God won't test you to see if you really mean it.
Right.
Because a lot of times we can take a firm stance and we wait and expect and hope God gonna save.
Sometimes you gotta go through the fire.
Sometimes you gotta go through the fire and let it play out. And sometimes God will cause you to go through the fire and let it play out. Because the fact of the matter is, if you fold up, then God knew what he was dealing with.
Exactly.
And if you go through the fire, God knew what he was dealing with. Because it's a lot of people that would have took that stance, we all talk a good game.
That's right.
Took that stance, heated up 7 times hotter. Now we was just playing, King. Play that beat again. Play that beat again. Play it again, Sam.
Watch how fast you bow down.
Bowing into no music.
Play it again. Come on.
20. And he commanded certain mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics, and their robes, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace.
So now, come on.
Therefore, because the king's command was peremptory, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace.
So what they did was they heated it up 7 times. So hot that the people who got close enough to push them in, and what they did was they bound them up in their clothes and they coats, and so you're not pulling no Houdini trick to try to get out. They tied them up and pushed the 3 of them in. And the people who were the ones to put them in, they were burned. That's how hot it was. And it also shows you the personage of this Nebuchadnezzar, because that's going to come up a little bit later. Like, I mean, his own men, his own army that were pushing him in the fire got burned. At no point did he, maybe we should rethink this. No. Well, they got burned. They might have well have gotten burned for a reason. Push them in. Come on.
24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was alarmed and rose up in haste.
Because God is good.
He spoke and said unto his ministers.
And David said, I have been young, and I'm now old. And I've never seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. That's what he said, right? Yes. Come on.
Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods.
So now, I mean, 3 men in, 4 walking out. I mean, like 4, like literally just walking, like in the midst of like hot fire. And Nebuchadnezzar is stunned, like
Perplexed.
did we put 3 people in? Come on.
26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace. He spoke and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of God Most High, come forth and come hither.
Come on up out of that hot fire. Don't say come get something to eat.
Then Shadrach, Meshach.
I don't know what y'all made y'all go down in that fire in the first place. Come on out, y'all. Come on. Well, he probably was a little far back because the 7. Come on out, y'all. Come on.
Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth out of the midst of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, and the governors, and the king's
And the
ministers.
fourth dude was gone. Like the fourth dude didn't come out. The fourth dude appeared, and the fourth dude disappeared. So we want to talk about God and the different things that God do. Listen, it said the secret things belong unto God. Amen. The fourth dude appeared, and the fourth dude disappeared. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out. Come on.
Being gathered together, saw these men that the fire had no power upon their bodies, nor was the hair of their heads singed, neither were their cloaks changed, nor had the smell of fire passed on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and have yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill.
Remember you said Doodle Hill last week? Yeah. See, I watched. Come on.
Because there is no other God that is able to deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
Listen, God puts you in a position where your standing and your integrity will allow others to testify to the glory of God. And it becomes a blessing for you. Not nobody else, but you. When you stand in your integrity, God bless you for you standing in your integrity. But guess what? When you don't represent God in the manner that God says that you're supposed to represent him, guess what? He's still going to get his glory. Yeah. It's just not going to come from you. Exactly. That's right. And you just lost your blessing. So now, listen, when we go out, God commanded that we look a certain way. God commanded that we act a certain way. Because what happens is, when you say you godly, people need to see godliness in you. When you say that you stand for a certain standard, people need to see that that standard of God that you say you stand for is in you. Right. And that allows people to be able to testify to the glory of God. That's what God made us for. Right. We have no other job but that. That's right. So we need to learn to be good at it. Right. Come on.
Verse 31. Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all that earth, peace be multiplied unto you. It has seemed good unto me to declare the signs and wonders that God Most High has wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation.
You know, just because, if you see, this is the king of Babylon. Yes, sir. If you look at and I think that this is important. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but this is a map, right? Yep. This is the Babylonian Empire before Nebuchadnezzar started and into his. So you see they in Iran, Iraq. They kind of touching Turkey, and they kind of touching up by the Caspian Sea, which is over here. This is the map of the Babylonian Empire after Nebuchadnezzar. You see all that orange? Nebuchadnezzar came in, and Nebuchadnezzar took over everything. All up by the Caspian Sea, halfway through Turkey, Egypt, mighty Egypt. They have been fighting with Egypt back and forth for a long time. And actually, one of the things that you'll kind of see is when you read in some of the portions of Ezekiel, that kind of crosses over with the book of Daniel too. Because Ezekiel was talking to the captives as they were in Babylon and they went into Babylon. Right. Come on, start with 4. Because what typically happens is when you start to do a lot, then you start to get a little bit bigger.
That's right.
And this is what happened with Nebuchadnezzar. Because Nebuchadnezzar conquered so much, Nebuchadnezzar started to become pompous.
Boast not of yourself.
Come on.
Chapter 4, verse 1, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid.
Remember I said a couple of weeks ago that when you're not right with God, you can't really sleep right?
Right.
There's no reason that a person who was king, who conquered all of that territory and had everything that he could have desired to have, there's no reason that he shouldn't be able to sleep at night.
Right.
He got guards around his bed and all those different things, all of the women that he want, all of the food, the wine, all of those different things. There's no reason you shouldn't be able to sleep at night. But when you're not right with God, God don't allow you to be able to sleep at night.
Right.
Come on.
I saw a dream which made me afraid, and imaginings upon my bed and the visions of my head affrighted me. Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the
So
dream.
you know the wise men is, this guy calling us again. You got another dream? Let's just bring Daniel now.
Right.
Because we know Daniel the only one that's going to be able to answer, so let's just bring Daniel now.
Right.
We got another king dream meeting.
Right.
Come on.
4. Then came in the magicians, the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers, and I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And I told the dream before him, O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret causeth thee trouble, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. Thus were the visions of my head upon my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew, and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field had shadowed under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the branches thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and a holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off its branches.
And now this was the part that was the problem. Because he had the big tree with the branches that fed everything and all of those different things, and now you have this watcher cut the tree down. Come on.
Hew down the tree and cut off its branches, shake off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from its branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of its roots in the earth, even in a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. The matter is by the decree of the watchers, and by the sentence by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and give it to whomsoever he will, and set up over it the lowest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen, and thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation. For as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee.
You know, I was looking at this, and I mean, I think that, this is just my opinion, I think that the wise men and the enchanters and the magicians, I think they knew what the dream meant. And I think they just didn't want to tell him. I'm not a dream teller person, but I looked at this as soon as I read it, before I got to the end, I kind of knew what the dream meant. Because it's pretty selfish, but I think the wise men and the enchanters didn't want to tell him. Because he had already gotten a dream about the nations taking over. Now they about to give him the interpretation of this dream. And you're going to see, even when Daniel went to interpret it, Daniel was kind of hesitant to tell him himself. But Daniel had to, because that was his opportunity. That was his responsibility given by God. Daniel had to tell him. Come on.
16. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while.
Trying to figure out how I'm going to tell this foolish.
And his thoughts affrighted him.
He done already started tossing people in hot furnaces, doing all types of craziness. How I'm about to tell him this dream now. Come on.
The king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream...
And the king recognized the hesitance in his face. Because when he was telling him the dream, Daniel's face told exactly that the dream wasn't good. And Nebuchadnezzar obviously had a feeling that the dream wasn't good, and that's why it troubled him so much. Come on.
Let not the dream or the interpretation affright thee. Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine adversaries.
This is the haters. This dream, listen, this dream comes from those people who don't want you to be king. They don't want you to shine, king. That's who that's coming from. You shouldn't even, he ain't tell him don't really pay no attention because he had to pay some attention, but just don't lay it too much to heart, king, because it's just come from the haters, Come on. 17. The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth. I want you, listen, when you read it, I want you to pay attention to the verbiage that they use, because I want to go into something else to kind of explain something that I think people get a little bit confused about. So I just want y'all to pay attention to the verbiage. He's saying, start from 17 again, please.
The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth.
High, reached up to the heaven. Come on.
Whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heavens had their habitation. It is thou, O king.
That, you the tree. You that tree that was strong and flourishing and reached up to the heavens and fed everybody, because with all of those nations, you got to be responsible to feed them, and you got to make sure you be responsible to protect them from other nations, because now that becomes your territory. So you got to protect that. So all of that protection that the leaves of that tree brought forth, that's you. Come on. That tree that reaches up to the heavens.
19.
Come on.
It is thou, O king. Thou art grown and become strong. For thy greatness is grown and reacheth unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth.
Your greatness reaches unto heaven. Come on.
And whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven and saying, hew down the tree and destroy it, nevertheless leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even in a band of iron and brass, and the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and it is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord the king, that thou shalt be driven from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and thou shalt be made to eat grass as oxen, and shalt be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and giveth to whomsoever he will.
Because that's the part that Nebuchadnezzar forgot.
Right.
Nebuchadnezzar, in all of his conquering, in everything that he did, Nebuchadnezzar had come pompous. And Nebuchadnezzar had started to, he started to say, my hand did this, and I, and refused to acknowledge God, even though God gave him many signs and opportunities to do so. Just last chapter, after the fiery furnace, Nebuchadnezzar was talking about how good and how good God is, and his mercy endureth to all generations. And now again, he's talking about me. So Daniel was trying to tell him, listen, the tree is you, and the Most High God has already established that this tree is going to be cut down because you need to acknowledge that in all of the good that you do, it all comes from God. And all of the strength that you have to do whatever it is that you do, that strength comes from God. So when the strength that we have to go to work, that strength comes from God. That strength that God give you to go to work, that you choose to go to work on Shabbat, that comes from you.
Yes.
The strength comes from God. The rest of that comes from you. Because if God gave you the strength to get work and to do all of these different things, you don't think God has the ability to make sure you're taken care of when you decide to stand firm and say, listen, you know, I don't do certain things.
Right.
And it's the funniest thing is that, like, we work on Shabbat. People work on Shabbat in a place where you have freedom of religion to do whatever it is that you want to do. They can't force you to work on Shabbat because the First Amendment say they can't force you to work on Shabbat. You know, when I was at orientation for the new job, my man went and he asked this question to everybody in the orientation. He said, "Let me ask you a question. If you come to human resources and you say, listen," and this is how he said it. He was flaming. He came and you go to human resources and you say, "I want to go every Wednesday night and Thursday morning and 5 and 10 to 2 on Friday because I want to go to the church of Beyonce to do my dance." This is what he said. This is what he said. That's what he said. I might be mixing up the hours a little bit, but he said the church of Beyonce. And he said, and you want to go to the church of Beyonce, if you give us a letter, say that you go to the church of Beyonce and you need these time off, can we discriminate against you for that? And the whole class, except me, I just wanted to get out the orientation so I could care either one. I couldn't care either way. And the whole class was like, yes, you can't do that. And he said, yes, you can. They said the church of Beyonce is a real church. They said it don't matter. Because as long as you say it, and as long as you stick to it, every Wednesday though, between 10 and 2, you better be leaving this job to go to the church of Beyonce. Or go to wherever you're going, but you better be leaving this job. And then you better be back after. We got freedom of religion to do what we want. So for us to choose to give in on something that we don't have to give in on, that's not God, that's you.
That's right.
That's you. Church of Beyonce. Come on.
23. And whereas it was commanded to leave the stump of the roots of the tree, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee. After that thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by almsgiving, and thy iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if there may be a lengthening of thy prosperity. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar at the end of 12 months.
So hold on. So now, Daniel knew that he was not going to be able to reverse what God said because God already said it. But what Daniel told him was, he said, but listen, what you can do is if you just kind of humble yourself, and you start to do good deeds, and you start to do all these different things, maybe everything will be okay. Just do this. Just do this. Because he knew he couldn't reverse what God had already said. Come on.
26. At the end of 12 months, he was walking upon the royal palace of Babylon. The king spoke in...
12 months went... So now you got to think about how the mind worked. 12 months went past. After Daniel told him the interpretation of that dream.
Right.
And even Nebuchadnezzar, after time started to go on, he started... Yeah, Daniel was probably wrong about this one. Or maybe he just reverted back to being who he was. 12 months went past. Nebuchadnezzar walking in the palace, walking around and the big statue that he put up here and all of the building that he did. If you read about Nebuchadnezzar II, you'll see that Nebuchadnezzar was, he built. I mean, Babylon, he wasn't the first king or the greatest king of the Babylonian Empire. He was the first and greatest king of the Babylonian Chaldean Empire. And he built a lot. And so he was walking in everything that, I mean, and he probably built a lot without lifting a finger. But he built a lot. Come on.
26. At the end of 12 months,
Walking in his palace.
he was walking upon the royal palace of
He
Babylon.
probably had a robe on of the finest Egyptian cotton. And he had on some slippers, nice furry wool slippers. And he had on jewelry, and he probably had on a nice crown of gold, and he was just walking around looking at all of the finery in his palace. Come on.
The king spoke and said, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built for a royal dwelling
Say
place,
what?
by the might of my power?"
So now, and that's what he said. I
And
mean, I don't know
for
if
the-
nobody was there. I don't know if he had an entourage with him. You know how some people just have people? Like Drake just got people. Drake walk and people just walk. And he's talking. You see this? I remember when I took this from the Egyptians.
Groupies.
You see this, sweetheart? This is when I personally went into Assyria myself and took this just with my bare hands. I'm gangster. That's what I do.
Went into the temple in Jerusalem.
By the might of my power and for the glory of my majesty,
My.
while the word was in the
Me.
king's mouth.
And that's the good thing about God. Because God already told you. God already told you. So God didn't have to warn him again. God didn't have to say anything. Come on.
While the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven.
Still voice.
O King Nebuchadnezzar,
I don't even think it was that loud. I think it was more like Nebuchadnezzar. Go ahead.
to thee it is spoken.
I'm talking
The
to you.
kingdom is departed from
Nebuchadnezzar.
thee.
Nebuchadnezzar. I'm talking to you. Kingdom's departed. That's it, bro. Come on.
And thou shalt be driven from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. Thou shalt be made to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomsoever he will. The same hour.
So the voice came less than 60 minutes later. Come on.
The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair was made grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws.
Hold on. Can you do me a favor?
Animals.
Can you go to the book of Isaiah? I want you to read chapter 14, verse 12. Isaiah 14:12.
The book of Isaiah chapter 14 verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O day star, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, that did cast lots over the nations?
Okay. So now, you have, how art thou fallen, thou son of the morning, day star, bright star, Lucifer. All of our books might have these different translations. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, me too.
Some good Levites out there. All these books might have these different translations. And based on this translation, you have people who are under the impression that this fallen star is some angel that disrespected God and was cast down from the heavens. Son of the morning, day star, Lucifer, bright star. Ben Hillel. And this is the verse that they use to justify that. But like we typically do, when we want to understand something, we don't read one verse.
Right.
No, sir.
We try to go to the beginning
Right.
and we read the whole thing
Right.
and we try to get an understanding of what's being read. Say it, right?
That's right.
Okay. So can you read from verse 4?
Isaiah 14:4. That thou shalt take up this parable against the king of Babylon and say,
Wait, who?
the king of Babylon, and say, how has the oppressor ceased? The exactress of gold ceased. Yahweh
How
has...
is the golden city broken? Remember all that gold?
Yeah.
The golden city.
Right.
Babylon. Come on. Come on.
Yahweh has broken the staff of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, that smote the peoples in wrath with an incessant stroke, that ruled the nations in anger with a persecution that none restrained.
And when you read about Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, that's exactly what he did. Come on.
The whole earth is at rest and is quiet. They break forth into singing. Yea, the cypresses rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon. Since thou art laid down, no fella is come up against us.
When did we ever read in the book of God that God couldn't control the host of heaven?
Right.
When we ever read that?
Right.
When was that ever a topic of conversation?
Never.
Come on.
The netherworld from beneath is moved for thee.
We still know that the netherworld is not hell, right? We still know that the netherworld is the grave. Right? It's still that, right?
Right.
Okay.
To meet thee at thy coming. The shades are stirred up for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. All the kings of the nations are raised up from their thrones. All they do answer and say unto thee, art thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the netherworld.
Right. Because Nebuchadnezzar started to think he was God.
Right.
That's right.
Come on.
Bring it together. In the noise of thy psalteries, the maggot is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. How art thou fallen from heaven,
So now,
O day
don't that seem to
star?
fit?
Yes.
Don't that seem to fit? If you read from verse 4, doesn't that seem to fit with everything else that we was reading?
Right.
How art thou fallen, O day star? Because you thought you were so big, you became so pompous, and now the Most High came and brought you down, and now the nations are saying, how have you become like us? But because it's a prophecy from the book of Isaiah, he's actually saying, this is what's going to happen to Babylon, so the nations are going to say, how art you become like us once the Most High God has brought you down?
Right.
Remember those trees that they talked about that reached unto the heavens and all of those different things?
Teach.
How art thou fallen from the heavens, O day star?
Yeah.
This is what they're talking about. So now,
Hold up.
we need to be careful when we take certain type of approaches when it comes to certain things, because everything has its origin. And if you look up the concept of Lucifer, Satan, day star, morning star, being some sort of a fallen angel that caused some rebellion in heaven and caused some other angels to disrespect God, is going to lead you right back to Luke 10:18.
Yeah. Come on.
Which is where? Luke 10:18. You find that in the Holy Spirit?
No,
never.
Not at all.
Luke don't even sound like a Hebrew word.
No.
Luke. Luke.
He's a rapper.
Luach. Luach. Maybe you can get a little closer.
Nah, he's a rapper.
That was a rapper. That was a rapper. We need to be careful. You know, I know a lot of times we want to explain stuff that we don't understand,
Right.
but we need to be careful when we trying to explain stuff that we don't understand to not bring in foreign understandings and foreign terminologies. Listen, it's perfectly okay to say, I don't understand.
Exactly.
Or you could just kind of read something for what it is. And if you had read this, Isaiah 14:12 for what it is from the beginning,
Yeah.
you will see that they was talking about Babylon.
And now Lucifer.
And not Lucifer.
Yes.
Let's go back to Daniel. Let's finish y'all. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right there. It's in the book.
I mean, and that's why while he's turning back, I mean, that needs to be our portion, right? And I think it was talked about earlier on today. Listen, if you stay close, you talked about it. If you stay close to, when you understand Torah and you stay close to Torah, certain stories, when you hear it, won't make sense.
That's right.
Because the first question that any logical thinking Israelite is going to ask is, can you show me in somewhere in the Torah where you got that from?
Right.
And if you can't come up with any scripture in the Torah to justify what you're saying, then maybe you shouldn't be saying it. And the other part, if you need to go way left to explain something, and you got to start pulling information that's not there, you're treading on, some real light territory. We need to be careful, is all I'm saying. We just need to be careful. Because at no point do we want to start introducing foreign concepts and teaching God's people wrong and leading them astray.
That's right.
We're back in the book of Daniel, chapter 4, verse 31. And at the end of days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes unto heaven, and my understanding returned unto me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever. For his dominion is of everlasting dominion, and his kingdom from generation to generation. And all inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say unto him, what doest thou?
God, the God that I serve, has absolute control over everything.
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 Amen.
And the only person who turned away in disrespect is us.
That's right.
We the only ones. Angels don't turn away in disrespect. When the angel came to Job and he said, the angel ain't do nothing to Job on his own, did he?
Not
He
at
ain't do
all.
nothing. He said, look, he said, if you do this to Job, I mean, he was talking a lot, but he said, if you do this to Job, then Job will turn around and curse you. If the angel was rebelling against God, the angel would have touched Job himself.
That's right.
But he couldn't. Because God ain't let him.
That's right.
Because God ain't control everything. Come on.
That's right.
33. At the same time, my understanding returned unto me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and my splendor returned unto me, and my ministers and my lords sought unto me. And I was established in my kingdom, and surpassing greatness was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven.
Extol the King of heaven and earth. Because he's the only one to be praised and extolled.
That's right.
And at a certain point, we all gonna learn.
Yeah.
We can learn the easy way.
It's always a hard way.
It's always a hard way. It's always a hard way. You know, I was about to say something, but I'll wait till the ride home.
For all his works are truth, and his ways are justice, and those that walk in pride, he is able to abase. Hallelujah.
Or on praise, respect, acknowledgement, and thanks I offer unto the great King of the universe, to the God of our Father, to the God of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, thanking him for all things and everything. Shabbat Shalom to